Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'd like to do something a little different and make a response to this idea that Elden Ring is a single player game. Specifically responding to some tweets as examples and thereby further the conversation. To preface this response, I'll add that seems to be this meme that Elden Ring is a single player game. Despite it obviously being multiplayer through such mechanics such as summoning phantoms for cooperative play, dueling, invading a host as a dark spirit, or being summoned as a blue to defend a host from dark spirits. Then of course there's the Colosseum DLC in the latest major update that allows for up to 6 players to go at it in team fights or free-for-all rules. So let's begin by setting the context of this discussion by looking at the tweets I'll be responding to. Initially, someone called Grums tweeted, "AAA games are the worst place for gamers. Everything is either a story playthrough or competitive PvP. I like to look at AA games for the fun stuff. They have enough budget and staff and can take on more risk and design. World of Warcraft was considered an insane risk when we made it." Then someone called The Lord's Gift replied, "I don't know, man. I guess shooters it isn't great, but single player games like God of War, Elden Ring, Horizon Forbidden West, Marvel Spider-Man, Insomniac games, A Plague Tale, these games are beautiful with a great story, but shooters are lacking." In this list of examples of single player games, such as God of War Ragnarok or Horizon Forbidden West, rarely are truly single player games. They do not offer body player support. This is in distinct contrast to Elden Ring. So I replied, "Elden Ring has significant asynchronous multiplayer, dude." To which the Big T said, "Still pretty different to what people typically think of as a multiplayer game." Now my next reply is important because I think it's very telling psychologically. I don't really care what other people typically think. I care about what things actually are. Single player, single. Single means one. It's quintessentially false to call Elden Ring a single-player game. See, I don't really care what people might or might not typically think because some of the most mistaken parts of human history were a result of what people typically think. But that is another conversation far afield from this one. But what I'm really interested in here is the subject in question, Elden Ring, and whether it is a multiplayer game. So let's begin by defining some terms so you know exactly what I mean when I refer to them. Both definitions are what is ordinarily meant and come from the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Multiplayer, adjective, involving or intended for more than one player, often involving or allowing simultaneous play by more than one player through a shared interface. While I couldn't find the term single player, I did look up the Merriam-Webster entry for single, with the entry that concerns us being 4b, of, relating to, or involving only one person. We can then supplement this with an entry from Wikipedia. Single-player video game. A single-player video game is usually a game that can be played by one person, which then goes on to contrast this with a single-player mode. Now, obviously, Elden Ring and the Dark Souls series fits the definition of a multiplayer game of involving or allowing simultaneous play by more than one player. This would be in distinct contrast to, say, a game like Hollow Knight or The Witcher 3: The Wild Hunt, which really are single-player games, in that they only involve or allow for one person to play. There is no native support for simultaneous play by multiple people without third-party modding of those games. Now, I'd like to share some of the reply to my tweet and respond to them. Hello Ichigo said, "You literally can play Elden Ring and not even turn the multiplayer on once. You can do everything in the game single player." There are a couple issues with this reply besides ending a statement with a question mark. Firstly, they implicitly concede it is a multiplayer game by referring to the existence of its multiplayer elements, thereby categorizing it as a multiplayer game. Notwithstanding, they say that you can do everything in the game single player, which is false on several instances, but it's enough to cite just one. Most notably, the latest major patch, 1.08, which introduced the Colosseum DLC, which is multiplayer only. Next was a tweet by Poetic Impact, who tweeted, "It would also be false to call it multiplayer." But is it? It's important to remember that a multiplayer game needn't be exclusively restricted to multiple players only, but to involve or allow simultaneous play by more than one player through a shared interface. So it definitely fits the definition of a multiplayer game. As a comparison, no one would think of the Halo franchise as a series of single-player games. They're multiplayer games which have a campaign that can be played as a single-player mode. Yet for reasons that can be guessed at, it seems somewhat unique to the Souls games to outright ignore their multiplayer functionalities when describing them. Eferantus replies, "Set your game to offline. There you go." But again, this argument misses the point entirely. Of course, you can have the option to set your game offline and play it. Many multiplayer games do offer this. And for Elden Ring specifically, you don't even need to set your game offline to have a single player experience, unlike previous Souls installments. However, all this is irrelevant to whether something is a multiplayer game or not. In fact, before the widespread accessibility of the internet, multiplayer games were played offline. For example, split screen in games like Mario Kart 64 or Perfect Dark. And this was back on the old 4x3 box televisions too. Now lastly, there was at least one more reply to respond to. However, perhaps due to some bug in Twitter's OS, I can't access it at the moment. But if I recall correctly, it was something along the lines of, the majority of players' experiences are single player. Now the easy response here is that that's a simple ad populum fallacy. For example, let's say hypothetically the majority of players' Elden Ring experience was multiplayer. Will this Twitter's users' opinions suddenly change that Elden Ring really is a multiplayer game? Well, it's hard to say for sure, I'm no mind reader, but if I had to guess, they'd still say it's a single player game regardless, given how relentlessly these people attack the very notion of multiplayer elements that don't suit them in these franchises. But the more important point is, I was not asserting that the Elden Ring experience is a multiplayer one. I could even concede and grant them the majority it is true. My argument was never about the experiences of others, nor would I want to invalidate someone's experience, as I don't want my own experience invalidated either. But my assertion has always been the taxonomy of the game, and not the experience. Well anyway, that's about wraps it up for this video. It's a little different from what I normally do. If you have any thoughts, please leave a comment. Try to address the arguments or ideas and not the people. Don't forget to leave a like, and we'll see you in the next video.